think it's one we go, it's not trickling in, it's still everything's how we do this. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first UKIP leadership hustings hosted by YI and myself, Councillor Thomas Heath. If you're watching at home on Facebook, please share the link. And for those of you in the audience, thank you. And please share the link on your Facebook so we can get as many people as watching this as possible. I'm joined on my left by Steven Woolfe MEP for the North West, Bill Etheridge MEP from the West Midlands, and then on my right, Jonathan Armour MEP from the North East, and Elizabeth Jones from the London region. We'll start with 5 minutes opening speeches, and I'll start with Steven Woolfe.
You want me here or
yeah.
Okay. Feels all odd trying to speak to an audience up there and also to a small grey box that's in front of us, but that's sort of things that's going to be the challenges that any leader will have to face. In my earlier speech today, I set out a vision that I believe that we can win seats across Parliament and at local elections. And my vision for UKIP is to be a party that can challenge not only the Labour Party but the Conservatives to win seats. And we owe our country that. For those 17.4 million people that voted Leave, I believe we can be the natural voice for them too. And so we have three fundamental challenges that we have to undertake. First of all, we have to make sure that Leave must leave. There is no Brexit light. And to achieve that, we must challenge the Conservative Party all the way to issuance of Article 50 and to make sure that we're on the four key points of that, obtaining our fisheries back. Control of our borders does not mean a 7-year break clause, that all our laws are back in the hands of government and that we take hold of the money that is now currently going to the European Union and spend it in our own land. Secondly, we must ensure that those people that made it clear that the Parliamentary Labour Party has simply become a jobs for the boys and jobs for the girls, almost a career option for them, and they've left those people that have been voting for them off the estates that I grew up, and I know Bill grew up, and also John. In those estates across the country, that their voice is now heard, that they're no longer ridiculed, ignored, and that is one of our major challenges. And to do so, we have to have the right team, we have to have the right organisation, we have to have the right funding structure, and we have to have the right policies. And I believe in order to challenge them, we have shown this country that UKIP stands strong, we listen to people, we brought the issue of immigration, and we brought the issue of the referendum to the fore. We made it mainstream, and we made other parties who ignored it listen, and voters came with us. I now believe that we must do exactly the same with that of social mobility. Whether it's in education, university, school, or in apprenticeships, or indeed those who come at a later stage. In housing, where we must ensure that those people who can't afford homes, or at least those who have an opportunity to get on the ladder in rents as well as buying. But in health, that we must ensure that the mental health and those with disabilities aren't left behind. And that across this country we must set out a message that UKIP now is the natural home for those people in the Midlands, the North and the Eastern regions who once voted for Labour, and to those across the country in the Conservative shires, we're a party that still believes in the small and medium-sized business. We know that those who are aspirational out there, who want to see their children get on and save for a future for their pensions, that we're the party that will still pursue policies of ensuring that government isn't spending too much, that we should ensure that the regulations are brought down, and that taxation is fair in the hands of the pockets of those across the country as we've done so before. So as your leader, if elected, I will be pursuing those policies that pursue everyone in the country, but I must make sure that we'll always be a patriotic party that believes in Britain and believes in freedom. Thank you.
And now, Bill Etheridge.
Right, hello again everyone. We had the sound and the fury of the referendum. We had 20 years before that of UKIP making the noise, being passionate, being fiery, being funny. And we brought our issues to the fore, and we played a massive part, if not the decisive part, in winning the referendum. But that is not the be-all and end-all. To stop at that point would be an abdication of our responsibilities and a betrayal of the people across the country who came together to vote for change. They didn't just vote to leave the EU because they don't like EU bureaucracy, and they don't like open door immigration, and they don't like our money being squandered on the continent. They voted to leave the EU because they need change and they need a voice. Within the constraints of the EU, they don't have that voice. And you've seen the main old political parties becoming more and more similar, more and more alike. Part of that was this chase for the middle ground. Part of it is because, frankly, in the EU, you couldn't do anything different because you were stopped from making your own laws. We now have a situation where, particularly in England and Wales, but across the country as well, the working class, particularly of this country, have said, we're ready for something different. A democratic revolution has taken place. And now we've got the chance to sweep away the remnants of the tired, discredited old Labour Party and replace them with a genuine, authentic voice for the people. The Conservative Party purely exists to be in power. It has no other reason for existence. The Labour Party no longer knows why it's there. It's forgotten its purpose. We have a purpose. We need to get real, get serious. It's our responsibility. The party has achieved great things despite ourselves at times. Let's be honest, we've been an absolute shambles. We've worked hard, individuals have pushed it, but the organisation has been a mess. And we haven't known where we're going to go from one day to the next because too many people are in too many managerial roles at the top of this party who don't, frankly, know what they're doing. I wouldn't put them in charge of running a corner shop. It's time that we sweep away that mess, we get serious, we look at policies and substance, of which I will be discussing. I've got policies that have worked through with the Institute of Economic Affairs and with Fathers for Justice, amongst others. Let's focus on policies, let's get the organisation right in this party, and let's seize the moment. The referendum was the beginning, not the end, and now this is the time when this democratic revolution takes hold and we change this country for the better forever.
And now, on to Jonathan Arnold.
Thank you very much. Can we take it as given that I'm going to agree that there is a huge market for UKIP to tap into in working class Labour areas. Partly because I said so in my speech earlier, and partly because that's exactly what I've been doing for the last 10 years. I've been saying that this is where UKIP has a massive potential. It's what we're doing in my region, in Hartlepool at the moment, where we got I think it's the 4th best general election result of any constituency in the country. We were just 3,000 votes short of winning that. We're the official opposition on that council, and we are going to take Hartlepool in 2020. So can we take it as a given that I believe that we need to be aiming at those target voters, because that is the strategic way forward? Can we also take it as a given that I agree that we must focus more on other policies now? Of course, we have to ensure that no means no, that Brexit means Brexit, that we hold our government to account to keep them honest and do the best job that we can of that. But unless we broaden our appeal beyond that and start actually using the policies that we have, and quite often those policies are great, but we've never told anyone about what those policies are in any sort of detail, then unless we start to do that, then we're going to struggle to gain traction. Let me just briefly tell you a quick story from earlier. After my speech earlier, I thought, what would Nigel do? And so I went down to the pub. And the landlord there asked us, what are you doing here, lads? And we said, we're at the Young Independents Conference. And he said straight away, he said, well, we had some people from YI in here earlier. And he said that he'd asked them what they were there for, and they said, oh, we've got a conference down the road. What's the conference? He said, well, it's boring stuff, you wouldn't be interested. And then he had to press them before they would be prepared to say that they were actually people from UKIP. And I think that shows to me that there's a problem, not with you guys, that there's a problem in terms of UKIP, in terms of the way that we are perceived. Because if we feel that in some ways that people feel embarrassed to say, to admit that they're UKIP, hang on a second, does that not mean that actually there's something about the way that we present ourselves that needs to be better? Is there a way that we can present ourselves that is more positive, that is more engaging? Actually, we should all be proudly banging that drum of UKIP, and we should all feel that proud that we are UKIP. And that's why I say we need to make changes, but also that we need to make sure that the changes that we do make are the right changes for UKIP. We don't need to sell the soul of our party or abandon our core beliefs. Actually, what we need to do is get better at messaging, get better at marketing, get better at selling actually the wonderful things that we do see in our party. We need to make sure that we're clearly the party that is never, ever, ever anti-immigrant, but that is a party that is prepared to talk about the tough issues, to talk about wage compression and loss of jobs that is caused by the current uncontrolled mass net immigration. I believe that I offer a lot as a candidate for the UKIP leadership. I believe that I've got the experience internally. We all know, I think, that the party needs structural changes. What I would say is, I have 6 years of experience when I was the party's General Secretary, of knowing that rule book inside out, of understanding how you go about making those changes. And I believe that I'm in a position where I can do that, where I can achieve that kind of change. Because let me tell you this, it's not going to be easy to make those kind of changes. I believe that I'm somebody who's got quite a lot of media experience. I've done televised debates in the general election campaign. I've spoken so many times in the Parliament chamber out in Brussels and Strasbourg, and you'll not find a bad interview from me in anything that you've seen anywhere there. I am also very much a safe pair of hands. I'm somebody who's done the grassroots stuff since 2001. So my argument, I suppose, is I've done a bit of everything. I understand this party from top to bottom, from grassroots right up to the top, and I've got that experience to be able to make a huge difference. So I believe that I'm a candidate who offers all of those different things. And finally, let me say two things. Firstly, we all know that there is some division internally within UKIP. We've seen it here today. It's been alluded to on the stage by certain speakers this afternoon. And if that is the case, what we need now is a candidate who will unite rather than divide. Finally, I'm not Nigel Farage. I'm never going to share Nigel's complete charisma and everything else. No candidate here can do that. No candidate here will ever out-Nigel Nigel. we can't afford to try until we fall flat on our face and become bad. So, I've just finished my 5 minutes, I think. I'm going to apologise to the chair for that and say, look, we need a different style of leader to follow Nigel. No one can follow Nigel by trying to do exactly the same. That's my pitch. Thanks. I'm sorry to be so
And now we move on to the last opening speech from Elizabeth Jones.
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Jones. I'm the Deputy Chairwoman of Lambeth. I'm an NEC member. I've been a member of UKIP now since 2010. My running mate is Councillor Lawrence Webb. He is the UKIP leader over in the London Borough of Havering. Between us, we have contested 33 elections for UKIP. Between us, we have garnered for this party over 100,000 votes. I think that's more than any other candidate team here today. We have fought every possible election for UKIP, and we've put our whole heart into it. It being London, of course, which is a Labour capital. We have not yet achieved a success. I haven't, Lawrence has. And we are still pushing forward to contest every election we will in order to raise the profile of UKIP in London. Now, London faces some very, very significant problems. The main problem, I would say, that London faces, which will spread through all the urban areas of this country, is the adherence to crazy, faddy ideas. We have the ULEZ coming up in 2020, whereby any car, I believe is over 10 years old, is going to have to be scrapped. Very, very, very strict guidance about air emissions. That's going to be coming your way. We have the problem with 24/7 bus lanes, a multiplicity of them in London. Absolutely ridiculous. They're no more than ideological bullying. The number of times I've been down the Jamaica Road in Southwark, have seen lines and lines of absolutely stationary traffic, buses, cabs, cars, absolutely stationary, right alongside a completely empty 24/7 hour bus lane. What on earth is the point in not making adequate use of road space? Furthermore, London has just spent £1.6 billion on the cycle superhighway. And what's more, it's not just one, we have the quiet zone and the outer zone. That is going to be coming shortly to the main urban areas of this country. I guarantee it. You too will have to deal with the cycle superhighway. And again, a complete waste of road space. The number of times going over Vauxhall Bridge, stationary traffic, stationary vans, stationary lorries, stationary buses. The agents of commerce in this country, stationary. Alongside that, a completely empty cycle superhighway. Quite extraordinary. And why? Ideological bullying, trendyism. And this is what UKIP is against. We are opposed to trendyism. We believe in realism and practicality. And this is why I want UKIP to focus on trade, trade and trade. Part of my job, I'm a solicitor, I'm a divorce solicitor, I've been in London practicing for over 20 years. I have to go out virtually every night looking for new contacts, new leads, new work. I have therefore have personal contacts with the Russian embassy, Egyptian embassy, Turkish embassy, the Pakistan High Commission. I could go on and on and on. This is the constant need for work and to make contacts. This is very, very good. It puts UKIP in a very good position. It takes us up a notch. It takes us up a league. So that we eventually, once our numbers are right with membership, once we've won more and more elections, we will be ready to play a significant role in the international stage, which is where these international trade deals and alliances are made. It is extremely important. At the moment, if we look at the Nobel Prize rankings throughout the world, America is #1, Britain is #2, Germany is #3. I want Britain to be #1 Nobel Prize winner in the world. I want UKIP to be the party that strives for British excellence, that strives for British creativity. This country has always had a great tradition of scientific openness and scientific creativity. That needs to be pushed forward and encouraged and encouraged. We had a bit of a setback with the clinical directives trial from the EU, which resulted in a drop in scientific research being done in this country. However, we are slowly leaving the EU, it is hoped, and I hope that we will leave the EU and it's not going to be kicked into the long grass, in which case we want all those clinical trials, that scientific research, to return to Great Britain. As I mentioned earlier in my speech this afternoon, Manchester has 25 Nobel Prize winners. Ernest Rutherford split the atom. Niels Bohr, incredible work with the hydrogen atom. And we have the Russian gentleman, sorry, I probably won't be able to pronounce names properly, who created graphene. Outstanding intellectual achievement, all on a shoestring. We need far more attention, far more money being poured into R&D. R&D is the future. It's the basis of wealth for this country, and UKIP will totally support that. Thank you.
So now you've heard from all of the candidates on their opening speeches, and now we are going to move on to questions that were emailed to us before. If you're watching at home on Facebook Live, please share this, and if you're in the audience, please share this as well, so we can reach more of our members. There's been a lot of talk, and it was mentioned in the opening speeches beforehand, of a division within our party, and it was mentioned in the speeches at this conference today. Are you a Farage loyalist, or are you a Carswell loyalist? This was the #1 most asked question by email and written questions today by YI members. Panel, starting with Stephen, which one are you?
I'm a UKIP loyalist.
I hate sitting next to Stephen. That's exactly what I was going to say.
It's only because I wrote it down, Bill.
Of course, UKIP loyalist, and Nigel was a great leader, still is in situ, and no question in my mind, Nigel and UKIP.
Of course.
Johnson.
I think there were 4 people here just all hoping, desperately hoping, that we would be the first person asked, so that we could all say that exact UKIP loyalist line. I'm sure it all came into all of our heads. Look, of course, UKIP is the party that I joined in 2001, long before Nigel Farage was leader, although he was very active at that time. And I've gone through seeing leader after leader, all do things in a slightly different way, actually, I have to say. And one of the things that's given me a bit of a perspective on is that quite often people who've joined the party more recently have only ever known Nigel as leader. And what I think it creates is a little bit of nervousness about people. Because they think, well, what do we do next? What do we do now? Nigel isn't going to be the party leader anymore. And I think what we need to do now is we need to create that unity and say it's not about personalities, it's about how we develop the party, but also it's about making sure that we calm that nervousness.
Elizabeth.
I'm supportive of the United Kingdom and what is best for her. What's best for her trade figures, what's best for her happiness, and what's best for her safety. This party is a broad church. We can house everyone of every policy persuasion, provided it's not too extreme, and that's how it should be. An open policy approach, open ideas will result in more creativity and a speedier approach to success. So I'm not a Faragist, and I'm not a Carswellist. I am for Britain.
I think Stephen wants to add something.
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that this party is a broad church with a broad section of people who look at issues of the day very firmly. But what I also might make sure is the fact is that Nigel did lead this party to the greatest success that we had, and he isn't going away. And if there is anybody in the party that thinks he should go away, then that's the wrong decision making here. I think he should be there as an advisor and guide at times when it's necessary, but whoever leads this party must be their own person to make the decisions. We must not throw away the talent and skill that we have in this party simply because there are divisions, but we must also recognise the history and the values of the people that have contributed to that, and least of all Nigel. We can use that.
If I may just return to that, I don't think one candidate here has suggested for one moment that we forget Nigel's legacy. Nigel is an outstanding person. What more can we say? We would not have had the referendum without him. The man's a political genius. No one wants to wipe out his memory. I would be delighted if he were to be perhaps the president of UKIP. I would be absolutely delighted if he were to become our permanent spokesman, and if he wanted to do all the media for the party, that would be magnificent. If he wants to come back, we would welcome him back. But we are where we are.
Yeah, and of course that's one of the things that UKIP has a tradition of doing. Because, for example, Geoffrey Titford, former leader of the party, we appointed as party president, and that's one very good way of keeping a former leader in touch with the party. But actually, what Nigel has said is that although he's resigning as leader of UKIP, he is going to remain as the leader of the group, joint leader of the group in the European Parliament. So that means that we'll still have Nigel standing up, giving those great speeches in Brussels and Strasbourg, and that is going to be a massive role over the next couple of years as we're negotiating Brexit. And of course, we need to make sure that Nigel remains there as somebody who is able to give that advice, that direction, and frankly, you know what, he's still going to be our best media performer. So I still want to see Nigel on Question Time, and I still want to see Nigel playing that role, but we also need to make sure that this isn't just about a new leader taking over, it's also about building a team around that new leader and bringing the wealth of talent that we have in this party to the fore.
Right.
It's all it says.
Right, Bill. Okay, so we'll move on to some of the questions that we've had, and I said to the candidates beforehand, I would choose some of the curveball questions that don't normally get asked. We'll go to Bill first on this one, see if he wants to be last.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
No questions from the audience.
No,
I'm sorry.
can I just ask that you restrict the time of answers?
Of course. One of the questions, well, it was asked a few times, is if you were a leader of UKIP, what would your policy be on the legalisation of marijuana?
Why have you asked me that first?
You didn't speak last time.
Look, I think that there's a serious issue in this country, and not just in this country, in the Western world, actually, with drugs. The war on drugs isn't working. And we have to start looking at things in a different light now. That doesn't mean that I'm all for complete liberalisation of all laws, but I think it's important that we actually think about things in a different way. Simply, I try and make a strong case for tough law and order and tough sentencing, as you may have noticed. But there is more to dealing with the issue of drugs than simply smashing people with tough sentences and putting more police out there. You've got to look at the root causes. You've got to try and understand the way that the drugs come into the country. And you've got to try and understand the issues of addiction behind it. So this is something where, as a party, we need to take a nuanced approach. And I would propose, were I the leader, that we actually set up a team to look into this in some serious detail and call in medical experts as well as legal people to really get a feeling for this. I don't think this is one just for a clunking fist. This is one where we've got to think more seriously, because the clunking fist approach of the war on drugs hasn't worked. So we need to look at this in more detail, but of course uphold the law of the land while we're doing it.
So would you or wouldn't you?
I'd set up a team to look into it.
Jonathan?
Well, it seems to me that the policy that UKIP already has on moral and social issues is to allow members of the public to call a referendum on key issues. Now, it will be one of these things where, if you look at UKIP members, I could take an audience like this, and I'm guessing that it would be strongly pro-legalisation. I could look at a different UKIP audience at a different part of the country and find that it would be strongly anti such legalisation. What we don't want to do as a party is to create division amongst ourselves on a policy issue, which frankly is a moral issue where people will take different views. So my view is that the policy that we have already about allowing the public to call a referendum on key issues is a great one, and what we should be doing is pushing and promoting the fact that we've got that policy of direct democracy. We've just seen great democracy in action through an EU referendum, so let's start applying that policy to other areas. Look at countries like Switzerland and some of the states in the USA where that idea works very well already, and let's continue along that train.
Elizabeth?
As I stated earlier, I've been a divorce lawyer for about 20 years based in London, and I have come across marijuana addiction not infrequently. And of course, I'm sure you're aware of the situation now that marijuana has now evolved and become a lot stronger than it was, let's say, 40 to 50 years ago. And I'm sure you're aware of the marijuana strain called skunk, which does cause psychotic breakdown. I have had very serious issues with regard to domestic violence and childcare issues resulting from addiction to this drug. Now, clearly that has a societal effect. It impacts on all of us. It impacts on our tax burden. It impacts on our housing burden, with a couple having to split up and having to go from one home to two homes. So, as Bill says, it is quite a complex problem. I mean, of course, the balance against that, if I were being flippant, of course, if you legalise it, you can tax it. So, it is a complex problem. At the moment, whilst marijuana is a lot stronger than it once was, whilst it's in the skunk mode, I would be opposed to legalising it because of its addiction misuse and also because of the mental health problems that it seems to cause with very severe psychotic breakdown. So I would say at this stage I would be opposed to legalising marijuana in its current state. Should it evolve, should it become a much weaker strain, then it may be. But at this stage I think it has too much of a deleterious effect on our society.
Stephen?
One of the things that you get as a member of the European Parliament, or indeed if you're any politician, is you will receive in your inboxes and your bags stories from people asking you for help. And I have received stories from people who have suffered mental health illnesses as a consequence of their excessive use of marijuana, or as it's been evolved into the various drugs that it can. I've also had in the inbox the terrible destruction of families that have been connected with drugs. None of them can sit in my bed with a nice beard, having a face chat over the internet and talk to Ed Miliband and call them friends and say, look at me, I was once a drug dealer, as a famous comedian supposed to have once done. I can't even bear to say his name, but I think you know exactly who I'm talking about. When that man has millions of pounds to be able to go to clinics and be sponsored by his own organisations to get clean, but there are many families across this country who do not have that same amount of money to be able to do so. So the question comes in as a natural libertarian who wants to allow people to carry on and undertake their lives in a way as long as it's not interfering with others. The impact of drugs isn't just solely about the individual. The individual also has an impact on their families. It has an impact on the hospitals. It impacts on the costs. It impacts on those who are selling the drugs, who then can use those funding to go in to higher crimes and create bigger amounts of money. It's part of the chain that's connected with people trafficking as it moves from Afghanistan through Turkey to help fund those who are having the resources for people trafficking to export people into our countries and see the deaths that occur across the seas in Libya, in Egypt. It is not isolated. And let's be clear, we spent billions of pounds on a so-called war against drugs, but there really never has been a war of drugs. Whilst you've got pop stars and film stars and movies glorifying drugs as though there is no consequences. Whilst there are consequences for people, their families, the communities, the governments, where people are being killed across the country, then as far as I'm concerned, I'm not yet ready to legalise.
UKIP has had a problem since the general election, where in by-elections, council by-elections specifically, where you've dropped between 5 to 13% of the vote. Candidates, what would you do to resolve that problem, Jonathan?
Okay, firstly, I think part of this is about understanding how we got to that position. I think we saw a huge success of UKIP. We went from this tiny party at the 2010 general election to having this surge, where we did very well in 2013, where we won the European elections in 2014. And I think we became almost a victim of our own success. Because having got used to being 20% plus of the vote, we then went to a general election under much tougher conditions, under first past the post, when huge parties were throwing the kitchen sink at it in a way that we couldn't. And although we came away with 12.6% of the vote, although we came away with the best so-called minor party, and we can't call ourselves that anymore, now can we? Right? Although we came away with a result that was historic and amazing in terms of share of the vote, it still only resulted in one MP. I think what we then found was there was a certain disillusionment amongst a lot of people who had voted UKIP, who had sort of thought that that was going to result in a big UKIP presence in Westminster. And those people still remained UKIP, but it became a lot harder to get those people motivated to turn up to a polling station and actually vote when it's snowing in January and you're trying to get them out for a local council by-election and you're knocking on those doors. It's not that they don't agree with you anymore, it's that the enthusiasm isn't there to the same extent. So that's what needed to be tackled. I think the referendum has actually made a big difference on that. So I think there's already some change that's being made. What we need to do next as a party is to make sure that when it's a parliamentary by-election, that we're developing our parliamentary by-election team, giving them the resources that they need, making sure that we're planning in advance, that we're making sure that they're funded in advance, so that they're ready and raring to go the moment a by-election is called, so that we're able to steal a march on the opposition. And we need then, within the regions, for local council by-elections, to be putting together our own local equivalents of that national type team. And that's part of professionalising the party.
Elizabeth.
I was the chairwoman of Southwark during 2014, and I therefore had to manage the local London elections for that branch. I was also involved in my own election in Lambeth. I recently stood in a local election, and I frankly think that the problem is twofold. Number one, we've had the referendum, and many people now take the view that UKIP's job is done. What's the point in voting for UKIP? They're done. We won the referendum. What more needs to be done? We can go home. We can go back to Labour. We can go back to the Conservatives. I think there'll be a bit of a bounce back in UKIP's favour, because I don't believe that Theresa May will be accelerating the process of Brexit at all. And I think about 6 months down the line, we'll probably be exactly where we are now, in which case I think that we will have an upsurge in numbers. Now, as I mentioned in my speech, another big problem we're facing is the fact that we simply don't have enough members. In fact, during the break, I was speaking to one of our youngsters who's got a by-election coming up soon, and simply don't have enough people in the local branch to stand, which I find extraordinary, but that's life. We have to concentrate on increasing our membership. We also need people to be more participatory. We need people on the school governors board. We need people to be out and about volunteering locally. We need people to be writing to local blogs, local websites, local newspapers as UKIP. It's extremely important to have a constant, steady press presence. It doesn't have to be grand, it doesn't have to be a lead article in the Times, just regular little blog items in little local blogs, little items in little local newspapers, provided the word UKIP is constantly dripping into the local community's consciousness. The problem is our numbers of members are decreasing. I think they will bounce up, as I said earlier, and we need to focus on increasing branch membership. This is critical.
Stephen.
The loss of seats, the loss of votes, is something that many of us are aware of, and we should all be concerned about as members. But I put it down to a number of things over the past few years. We've had growth pains, as Jonathan has said, but we have concentrated over the last 2 years predominantly on a general election, and that's followed by the position of the referendum. And we've put a lot of money and resources into that. And part of the problem of our structure has been that we've never really identified properly and followed it through the needs of our council elections. And I think that we have that prime opportunity now in terms of the way that we should restructure our party. And one of the reasons why I put that process through and saying we should abolish the NEC is because I think that we should now go to effectively a flat structure with about 7 different identifiable divisions, if you want to put it in those terms, where we're now concentrating on the new era for a new Britain. And that's a new UKIP in this sense. And one of those divisions will be that we look solely at campaigning and elections. And within that, there are 3 separate areas. There are the general elections, there are the local elections, and then there are other elections. And what I can tell you is that with Tim Aker, who we know has done exceptional work for us down in Thurrock, has already produced an outline plan of how we can work in those general elections and also in the council elections. And that would be the policy that I would have him help lead that new division to ensure that we do so. So there would be a structure in place that would go across the country to our councillors. But that would be backed up by another division. And the division is that our councillors would have proper training, because it will be candidate selection and candidate training. No more will training be simply MEPs and councillors talking at our members. They will be given the ways of how to campaign and work very clearly. And with that comes membership, money and support. And we will have that backed by policies too that they have to win on social mobility.
Well, speaking as the only councillor on the panel, I'm very pleased we're discussing this one. You can win council seats whether or not the party's fortunes are up or down nationally. Quite simply, it's hard graft. It's about getting together a branch of people who go out on the pavements, talk to people, who go and knock doors, who find out what's going on in the local area and focus on that. It's not about people who go out and talk about the grand themes of the day. We had a ruling in the Dudley Borough where we now have 8 Metropolitan Borough Councillors, one of the best results in the country. And we had a rule that anyone who goes out in a council by-election or a council election and discusses the EU gets an official warning. We don't want to talk about the EU because that's not what people care about on their local council. They care about potholes, dustbins, crossings, parking, child safety. Now, the way to get more members, the way to make this happen, you get involved with local action groups, you find what people really care about on the ground, and you work and you work and you work. And the way then you go forward is your name is first. They know Fred, Bert, Bob. He's a good person in the area. He does a lot of work for the local people. He happens to be UKIP as well, which is going to get him some support. But the fact that you're engaged with your local community is what wins you local council elections. And frankly, folks, we can all do it. It's just a lot of hard yakka, and you've got to get stuck in and do it and work it hard. Yes, the national issues that have been raised are vitally important, but you can win a council seat. Look at the Lib Dems. Look how many council seats they still take. And frankly, they're flatlined nationally, but locally, they win council seats.
We're going to leave local council elections now. The second most asked question was about the NEC, especially after the speeches today, which Stephen just alluded to. Elizabeth, you're on the NEC, and Stephen is proposing to scrap it. How do you feel about that, and what would you do?
I know that Stephen says he wants to introduce a flatter structure and wants to have, I don't know, I'm not too sure what he wants to do with the elections, but we already have a party director. We did have Lisa Duffy, who was quite competent, quite busy sort of woman. We then had Paul Oakton. The role of party director still remains to cover elections. I too have also heard of the Tim Aker outline plan for winning elections. In fact, I heard of it quite some time ago.
Can you stick to the NEC?
No, I'm going to answer this. We still haven't had a copy of it. Now, the purpose of the NEC is to introduce an independent governance of the entire party. That covers governance and finance. I joined the NEC in December 2015. Obviously, I cannot go into details to the situations with the NEC, but I joined in December 2015, and as a result of the new NEC, our finances are very much back on track. We are far more financially healthy than we were before, and that's because of NEC involvement. Without the NEC involvement and guidance, I'm sure probably Jonathan would agree with me, we may be facing a different future, but thank God we are not. It also involves the issues with regard to candidates, involves issues with regard to rules, but it is an important... yes, it does. I don't know why you're nodding like that. I actually sit on the NEC, so does Jonathan. I know exactly what happens, thank you. So there we are. So we want the NEC to continue. It's an independent break with certain people, as Nathan will testify. And I understand, Nathan, earlier on you said that people on the NEC were mad, which are quite extraordinary. Bearing in mind we've got some extraordinary people on the NEC. We've got Schlivnik, who's got a PhD from Cambridge. We've got Piers, a qualified barrister. Toby Coke, outstanding ex-businessman. We've got Alan Bowen, a self-made multimillionaire. We do have some extraordinarily capable people. Of course, if being above the average IQ or being above the average in business is mad, then okay, they're mad. I'll grant you that, Nathan.
Well, the only Mad that I remember was that great television program, Mad Men. You know, and I just wondered whether I could have the same style and skill as the Mad Men program, to be honest. I'm not going to come into here to get into the format of insulting people either way. My structure about it was, having sat on the National Executive Committee, I recognised that it had very strong limitations and very big mistakes. And amongst those big mistakes is, it might say that it is independent governance, but what I unfortunately found over a period of time is that there were always those who felt it was actually their views that mattered more than the members. And so in my structuring that I wanted to have, and what I propose in place, is to introduce that now into a new People's Forum. A forum where the chairmen of our different regions are elected by the people of their own constituencies, their own regions, will vote for their own chairman. And that chairman will then come to a forum because they will be able to pass up what's happening in their regions. And it gives an opportunity for the chairman of each of the branches who work hard, like Bill has said, to put their names forward after a period of time and be voted by their own members in their own region to become that chairman. So there is a natural flow now from the people, more direct. It's more direct democracy right down to their own people, and they can then have a forum where they pass on what's happening in their local areas, and the party can pass on to them. That is what I believe in the freedom and democracy of our party, a people's forum made out of the chairman, voted by our members in their areas, so that we have a regional balance once again, rather than an unbalanced NEC that represents more areas than others.
Well, not getting into who's bad and who isn't, there are some people on the NEC who actually know and get on with rather well and think they're good people. However, let's be absolutely honest, the current structure of the party doesn't work. I think there's a very, very strong argument, just alluded to by Stephen, and I think it can be built upon, for regionalisation of the structure. I think so many times I've heard people in the Midlands and the North, they say, well, I'd love to go to the NEC. I can't really afford to get down to London. I can't afford to do these things. And there's never been an opportunity for proper democracy within the party. And that's what I care about. I want the members to have a full and strong voice. So, yes, the NEC system has to go. It has to be a restructuring of the way the party is looked after and represented. And what's more, were I to be elected leader of this party, the very next day, everybody in the management structure will be looking at reapplying for their jobs. Because quite frankly, this party at the top is a shambles. And we talk about the old First World War analogy of lions led by donkeys. And I can think of nothing more appropriate to suit the way this party has been mismanaged for many years.
I think there are two equally mistaken views that you can have with regard to the current organisation and party structures with the NEC. One is to say, there's no problem, it's all working fine at the moment, and actually, frankly, anyone who sits through the emails that we're bombarded with the NEC on a daily basis must surely see that actually there is a problem, and that problem does need to be fixed. The other extreme is to go to a position of saying that you want to abolish a National Executive Committee altogether, because the problem is that the entire party constitution is wrapped around that. The NEC, we need to have a structure which is a check and balance on the party leader. If one of us gets the party leadership and goes rogue, there has to be a democratic check and balance in place on the party leader. You need to have directors of the limited company, which comes from the NEC. You need to have a body which writes the party's rules of procedure and make sure that we all play by internal rules, otherwise you end up with chaos. We need to have we need to have oversight of what's going on. All of those requires a national strategic executive body. However, that does not mean to say that it doesn't need to change. I think where Bill starts to say that one of the ways of looking at changing that is to make sure that you look at regional representation as an idea, but frankly, none of us around this table can promise to abolish the NEC. The leader doesn't have that power. The only way that these changes can be made is through constitutional change, which goes out to the membership, and the party membership must vote with a 2/3 majority to bring it in. So what I would say is, we look at exactly what the changes are that are needed, probably on a regional basis. We consult everybody. We work out a better structure, and then my pledge as party leader would be, I would put that to a ballot of the party membership, because that is the only way that you are allowed to change the party's constitution.
Stephen.
So Jonathan, are we saying that we can't reform the NEC unless we get a 75% vote of the membership in terms of whatever the vote percentage you're talking about? Because the thing that we argued against in the European Union is that it was unreformable because of the problems that it created. And what we need now is to have some radical change. And our radical change was to leave the EU. If we have a radical view, can we not put that to the membership? And the membership want to have a people's forum in which chairmen of this party, voted in by their members, are entitled to have their policy making. Can we not do that instead?
So, firstly, it's a 2/3 majority that's needed. Secondly, you have to propose exactly what the change is, and you have to rewrite the constitution around it. You can't say, oh, we're going to tear up the constitution, because you would find yourself in court very, very quickly. It has to be put to the party membership. We have to get a 2/3 majority, and whatever happens, the functions that we need some sort of national executive body for, the oversight, the check and balance, the accountability, the structure, the directors of the limited company, an organisation that deals with the party's rules of procedure. If you must have an organisation which can do all of those things. So we've got to make it clear what it is exactly that is proposed before the membership can vote on it. And I'm not saying that all of those ideas are wrong, but what I am saying is, you can't simply say, I'm going to do this. Actually, what we've got to say is, we're going to come up with the best thing that we can come up with together as a party, taking all views into account, sending it to the membership. You're not going to get a 2/3 majority of the whole party membership unless you've got the party on board.
Elizabeth.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for that, Jonathan. That's very, very helpful indeed. I have prepared a slate of reforms that I'm seeking to make to the NEC. I think it is vitally important that the NEC, we have an NEC, but it does need to change. And I think one of the most important changes, I don't know if Jonathan would necessarily agree with me, is that we need an elected chairman. At the moment, the chairman is in the gift of the leader. So that makes it very difficult for the NEC to sometimes, or all the time, to behave in an independent manner because of this top-down appointment. So the chairman of the party should be an elected post, and that should be down to the membership. So if you've got managerial experience, you want to put yourself forward, we think this is the best way forward. I also have a slate of changes I want to make with regard to the voting, who's actually going to be on the NEC. But I have to say, I do not agree with the regional proposal. We've had this in London. It's absolutely disintegrated and caused significant problems. We have gone through, I don't know how many London chairmen as a result. It's been quite a difficult time for London. And also, we've got the problem with the rotten boroughs argument. Many branches, perhaps in UKIP, with all due respect, may be very, very small. So you'll have one branch which may comprise, I don't know, possibly 5 people will be producing a representative. Other branches may have about 200 people. They too produce one representative. And they will have equal weighting. I don't know if that's strictly fair. I think the fairest situation, which is mirrored in all the major parties, is the current NEC, whereby it goes to national ballot. Anyone here can put themselves forward to be on the NEC. Anyone here can vote. And it's an entirely free vote. It's not a pre-selected list. It's not predetermined with regard to ranking. It is entirely free for the entire national membership of UKIP. And I think that is very democratic. issue I don't think is democratic is the fact that the chairman is not an elected role, and I think that is of vital importance.
Yeah, democracy is the key thing. We're supposed to be a party that fights for democracy, and at the moment we have a situation which I think is antipathetic to democracy. And I think one of the things that Liz said there, I think is a very good idea. The elected chairman idea, I think, stands good ground. I think it's all about democracy, and that's great. However, I do think we need to regionalise, and not only would I like to see us regionalise and have members and representatives on the new ruling body from around the country, I'd like to see the meetings for that ruling body move around the country. And what's more, I'd like to see what becomes a head office for the party move further to the north of where it always has been. I think if we're a party that is of the whole country, it's time to stop being so South and London centric on issues. It's time for more democracy within this party. It's time for the members to have more of a say. And certainly, one of the things I regret very much is when I do become, hopefully, leader, what I would love to do is be handing out P45s to people who mismanage the party. Yeah. And sadly, the people at the top won't be around anymore. The chairman will have gone by then already. So I'll miss out on that, but I might send him one to frame. So we'll go with the reforms to democratise the party and never again be in the mess that we currently are in. And let's get this out to the regions and move around the country.
Okay, so we'll move away from party structure now and we'll go back to another policy question, or more what is your opinion on this? We've had quite a few questions about radical Islam, and what will you do as leader to tackle radical Islam in the UK? Stephen.
We have made it very clear in our party that just as everybody else in the country has people that believe in a religion, that should be honoured and respected. It doesn't matter which religion that you are in this country. That's one of our great benefits of who we are in terms of our independence and democracy and freedom. But we've also said quite clearly that we have to deal with the problems that are impacting our nation. And as you saw in my first speech in Doncaster in 2014, we believed that our government had gone soft on our borders and protecting the interests of our nation, because one of the first things that we should do as any government is protect our people. We said that there should be 2,500 new border agency guards to make sure that we're protected. We said that we should ensure that we have our own borders back controlled by our government. And it's part of this. It's part of this. Because in terms of protecting your borders, first of all, you have to ensure that you create the right security framework. And without that right security framework, we then have to work with our international partners, which is why we said that we must be attacking ISIS in the nation states of where they're alive. I said that we had to have an international force, which we've never done. We never had a UN resolution that put together a force to take them on in their home ground. And here in this nation, we said firmly that our own policies must be that we should prevent radicalisation in our own country. We should be exporting and expelling anybody that has those same radical views rather than putting them in prison. Yes. We should ensure that we have more security agents and others monitoring the 2,000 odd individuals in this country that have been left alone, one tagged. We make sure that our law and order provisions have not been weakened as they are or were under Theresa May. So the radical Islam is impacted in a number of ways. Internationally, controlling our borders, increasing our forces here, and our security. And then when we find those who are radicalised, we make sure that they're expelled. Yeah. And that is one of the key points that we had in the manifestos from 2014 in my speech, all the way through to today.
You start firstly by understanding the nature of the problem. And you start by understanding that, that one of the big issues is that when you look at Saudi Arabia, and it has the strict Wahhabist interpretation within a culture which has a very strong monarchy, counterbalanced which counterbalances the religious side of things, that operates in a particular way in Saudi Arabia, which I dislike, but it retains a sense of order. Then what you say, I completely agree, it's barbaric. I completely agree. Now, what then happens is that Saudi Arabia, a rich country, pays to build mosques in countries across the world. And that money then goes with no strings attached, except quite often they choose the imam, which then chooses the religious structure of what happens in that mosque. And those teachings then develop, but in a way that when you export that extremism out of Saudi Arabia, you then find that what comes in is that there is not that monarchy counterbalance, and it then turns into the kind of thing that we see happening in Syria and in other countries. So you have to understand that fundamentally. And then once you've understood that, and understood that this is where the problem is coming from, you then look at your policies to make sure that we stop that kind of thing from happening. To make sure that those people who want to come to the UK to practice as an imam, you make sure that you're very clear about what their philosophies are and what on earth they're going to be teaching in your country. You make sure that you're very clear about what you're going to allow to be taught in British schools and what you're not going to be allowed to be taught in British schools. You make it very clear in terms of education that actually what the government tried to do about British values has been toothless and hasn't actually really promoted what we in this country would genuinely consider to be Britishness. You have to look at the security and intelligence, of course you do. And then you move on from that and say, actually, the ECHR and the Human Rights Act are now part of the problem, not part of the solution, and you need to make sure that those are scrapped and that we go back to a system where Britain used to lead the way in genuine human rights, but we don't allow our human rights to be abused. So there's so many things that we need to do to make sure that we protect our citizens from that extremist threat. But also we need to remember that there are a lot of other threats to... I'm out of time, aren't I? I won't make that point then.
Bill.
The issue of radical Islam cannot be ignored any longer. It's too late to take politically correct ways around looking at this, and it's time to get to the root of the problem. Now, yes, I agree, religious freedom is crucial. All freedom is precious. But when you get to the point when you are a radical group promoting terror, hating freedom and everything it stands for, now it's time for action. Those actions, for me, are very straightforward. A complete ban on the application of Sharia law in this country. Prosecution and rooting out of those responsible for female genital mutilation. A ban on the burqa in public places and making sure you must be identified. No longer can we accept this cultural device. It's time for a burqa ban to be instituted in this country. Forget, although there are very many valid foreign policy discussions to be had, the majority of terrorists are homegrown, they are our problem to deal with, and political correctness has stood in the way far too long. It's time to be direct, forceful, fair, but straightforward, and put this situation right in the spotlight and deal with it.
What impact Labour's policy had upon the situation with radical Islam. I'm afraid it did an issue. I'm talking about the invasion of Iraq, I'm talking about the invasion of Afghanistan, I'm talking about Cameron's bombing of Libya. Were these wise? We removed Saddam Hussein, we removed Gaddafi. We were, well, our governments were somewhat implicated in causing a very, very unstable situation. Was it wise? Absolutely not. Obviously, we have the benefit of hindsight. Stephen's suggestion that we should enter into any military involvement, whether it be with the UN or howsoever, is absolutely wrong. On no account should we engage in any form of military activity against any Islamic State whatsoever. When I say Islamic State, I don't mean Raqqa. I mean any country practicing Islam. Stay well back. It is grossly unfair for us to interfere. When we interfere, we are upsetting the balance of that country. We have done enough in Iraq. We have done enough in Syria. Now,
I'm doing their work for them by saying that.
I'm not doing their work for them. I'm ensuring that young working class British soldiers are not having their legs blown off unnecessarily. I'm ensuring that we don't have the excuse from the bleeding hearts and the ladies